Welcome into the OBR streaming network. This is a brand new edition of The React. My name is Brad Ward. The man next to me is the always fantastic Pete Smith. Follow him on Twitter at _Pete Smith _. What's going on tonight, Pete?
Not a whole lot because the Browns obviously played last Thursday, and it feels like a while ago. It does feel like the Browns genuinely got another bye week, which they could use. So it'll be interesting to see if they can take advantage of it. But yeah, it's been sort of a quiet week for all the right reasons as opposed to the wrong ones.
Yeah, it's a weird time of year schedule-wise, especially football-wise. So, on a week where that is loaded with football, college and pro, the Browns literally play the very last game of the entire weekend, pretty much, right? So Monday Night Football in Denver. Interesting matchup. Denver now 7-5. They were 5-5. They won 2 in a row. They beat the Falcons. And then the Raiders beat the Raiders twice in the same year for the first time since 2014. Bo Nix is having a pretty good rookie season, 16-6, I think. 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Their defense is very good. Nick Bonito has 10 sacks. What do you think of this matchup?
Well, it's interesting because the Broncos, there's a lot of pressure on them by virtue of the fact that they're not going to win the division. It's gone. In fact, the Chiefs, I think, can clinch this week because they're already 10-1 and potentially going for 11-1, and I think that would lock it up. The other part of that is even in the wild card, just in their own division, they've got to deal with the Los Angeles Chargers, who are obviously coming off their own loss. But nevertheless, it's a tight divisional race. The AFC in general is a very difficult conference to get wild cards in, as the Browns dealt with last year. They were the 5 seed at 11-6. So there's pressure on them because all their games have have added pressure. Whereas the Browns, in even as they put pressure on themselves and sort of fans and media put pressure on them, I think in a lot of ways they're playing with free money, and that could benefit them a little bit. The other thing you have to note with the Broncos is they've played a pretty easy slate of games recently, which more power to them. They took care of business when they had to, whereas the Browns lost to the freaking Raiders and the Giants. So you got to give them credit where it's due. So they play really good defense. They've got a quarterback who's being efficient right now. They've obviously got a receiver in Cortland Sutton who destroyed the Browns last year. So they've got a lot of talent, a lot of things going in the right direction. And then the Browns have this opportunity to sort of flex a little bit in terms of they've got more, we when they win, we sort of overvalue the talent on the roster in some ways, but when they lose, and the way they've lost this year, people think they're completely devoid of talent. And I think they have an opportunity to prove that they are a good football team and can carry over some of the things they've done pretty well. Jameis Winston hopefully continues to play well. Jerry Jeudy's on a tear. Defensively, it's just a question of which defense is going to show up in a given week, especially on the secondary. Myles Garrett comes off a monster game. This is the thing where we really don't know what's up with his feet, but you'd like to think that another 10 days of, not beating him up, that he's going to be able to be more feeling better and able to turn the corner a little bit better and do all those things. And then the Browns have so many of these young players who just need more experience and all these other things. They also just need guys to get healthier. So it's an interesting matchup. It's weird because the Browns and Broncos seem to play every year, despite the fact that it doesn't feel like it, but they actually do play quite a bit. So there is some familiarity there, even though the Broncos have changed quite a bit from last year to this year.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, Sean Payton kind of had their number last year a little bit in that game. So it'll be interesting to see how, this is a different team. Their defense is what I consider better, and offensively, but like you said, their schedule, as I went through on the doghouse as I was filling in for Mike this week, they've beaten some of the weaker teams in the league for their 7 wins. So
Yeah, I mean, they beat the teams they're supposed to beat, and that's how you end up in this position. Had the Browns done that, be a different conversation. Unfortunately, they had dead weight at quarterback for a lot of those games, and it paid. The one exception being the Raiders games where Deshaun Watson actually played pretty well, and the rest of the team just was awful. But those are games they, in retrospect, are certainly kicking themselves. They didn't beat what is an awful, awful Raiders team, an awful New York Giants outfit,
yeah.
who interestingly enough, the thing that's interesting to me about the Giants is there have been all these Browns fans and some media who have basically suggested that the Browns should basically lean into all their young players, meaning DTR and some of these others, and effectively tank. Well, the Giants are doing that. They said flat out, we are tanking when they said Tommy DeVito is going to be our quarterback. And what has happened? They've played one game, and everybody wants to kill everybody else on the Giants, from players who are pissed to, I don't think ownership is going to change their mind and fire these guys, because I think they had to sign off on this decision in the first place. But this is what, this can happen where you have real veteran players like Dexter Lawrence, who got very upset about this whole situation, who is, to me, in the conversation and should be one of the top options for Defensive Player of the Year. Now, the record's going to kill him, but he is phenomenal, absolutely dominant player. And coming out and being like, what are you guys doing? We're trying to win football games, and to sort of like undermine this. And you're doing this in a New York market. And then the other question becomes like, let's assume Tommy DeVito is successful, as I'm very sure he can be, in terms of losing all these games. To get who? Is it, which quarterback are you selling out for in that scenario? Like, these are all things. Caleb Williams, like, it's, as I've had more time to watch more prospects, and then I watch the rookie class and what they're doing right now, and I'm just like, these guys are not, these are not the same. Whether it's Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels or Drake May or Bo Nix, I certainly think that the quarterbacks that are going to be in this draft class are talented, but I think there's a significant drop off from one group to the other.
Do you have an opinion on who you think is the most NFL ready?
It's an interesting question. I think both Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are very NFL ready, because for all the reasons I've laid out in the past, they've played a ton of football. You can criticize Cam Ward for playing in 3 different programs, although in one case he went from Incarnate Word and followed his coach to Washington State. So you might give him a little grace on that. And then he's gone to Miami. But the reality with that is, like, that has also forced him to adapt to, different locales, different competition, different defenses all over the place, and prepared him in some ways. And the same thing for Shedeur Sanders, starting at Jackson State and then going to Colorado, has played, and then specifically in Colorado's case, going from running away from the Pac-12 because they were scared to the Big 12, which is nowhere near as good as the slate they faced last year. But they have played a whole lot of different teams and defenses that you are undeniably going to be benefit from that. Now, the flip side of that is that lack of familiarity, not having to play Oregon and some of those teams again, who would have a better read on you a second time, give you more things to sort of challenge you, is a little bit different. But that's sort of the thing you look at. But like, the thing that jumps out at me with Shedeur, and again, watching Shedeur Sanders and him play, I think there's a lot to like about his game. But I watch his arm on Saturday, and I watch some of these, Caleb Williams, his arm on Sunday. It's not even close. Like, Caleb Williams throws these absolute lasers, and that's the thing where if you look at Ward, he's got a big arm, and he makes throws that Shedeur simply can't make. Now, you can say that Shedeur might do certain things better in terms of touch and timing, and I wouldn't disagree with that. But like, to me, right this second, I'd be looking at, like, Cam Ward can make throws that Shedeur just simply cannot. And there are, and particularly, this is where you sort of get in this nuanced area. If Shedeur gets to go to a team like Las Vegas, or somewhere else with a dome, it's not a huge deal. But like I also watched Jameis Winston play in the for all these people who don't want a dome anymore, for a game that, as Joe Thomas describes, once or twice in a career, Shedeur Sanders' arm would have been miserable in that Thursday night game. Like it would not have worked the same way. Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston had big boy arms that could sustain in that. And one of the things you have to sort of worry about with Shedeur, I don't want to say he can't physically develop anymore, but the thing you sort of worry about with him is he's had access to everything his whole life in terms of the best in terms of training, the best in terms of, getting stronger, weight room and all these other things. Like there's a part of you that worries where, let's compare to Josh Allen. Josh Allen was basically, never had access to the level of coaching or all these training and all these other things. So when he got to Buffalo, like this was a whole new world where Shedeur has had this the whole time. Yeah. And you sit there and you wonder, and according to Dane Brugler, his verified weight before the season was 198 pounds. That is smaller than DTR. And I give Shedeur all the credit in the world. He is tough. He gets up every time. He's taken some vicious hits, including this week against Kansas, where he took that shot directly to his knee. But it's sort of hard as a person who has watched DTR, who's every other play seems to be grabbing at something, and that's it's just bad luck. But it just sort of reinforces the fact that they're just different in terms of size relative to everybody else. Cam Ward's probably going to end up having 25 pounds on him more than Shedeur Sanders does. And again, do I have reason to believe that with everything he's had access up to at this point, that he's suddenly going to put on another 10 to 15 pounds of strength? I'm inclined to doubt it. Now, he can prove me wrong and do all these other things, and more power to him if he does. I'll say I'm wrong. But like, those are things where I sit there and get worried about what that's going to look like in the NFL. Like I understand why I've heard comparisons to a guy like Brad Kaya in the sense that, from a tool standpoint, in the sense that you worry that Shedeur's tools are what they are and they're never going to improve. And that is something you have to take into account if you're a team that plays in the AFC North or some of these other places. It's the same issue I had. Coincidentally, one of the issues I had with Deshaun Watson coming out of college, he did not have a strong arm. He got stronger in the NFL. It got like even this past season, his arm was stronger in the same way that some other quarterbacks, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, they've gotten stronger. Can Shedeur also do that? I don't know. But that's where I sort of, if you're just looking from a Brown standpoint, right this second, Cam Ward's arm can play in this league. He played in Pullman in Washington. He's going to be just fine. He's played in some of these cold weather games. I have no concerns about that. And there are reasons. I have my reasons why I think the Browns would really like Cam Ward, which isn't to say they would take him, but there are a number of reasons why I sort of, based on what I've watched, can sit there and go, I could see why Kevin Stefanski really liked Cam Ward. Now, the one thing I will say about Cam Ward, it's eerie how much he looks like Deshaun Watson moving around. Like,
oh, God.
It'll hurt him with Cleveland. Yeah. There will be people who will watch him and go, my God, he looks just like Deshaun Watson. Other than his throwing motion is a little different, but just in terms of him maneuvering in the pocket and sort of how he sort of extends plays. Now, I would push back and say he's the non-broken version, but I that was something that just was glaring to me in terms of things that when I watching his games and some of these where I'm like, he's the Deshaun Watson-est looking quarterback in this class.
Fantastic. Yeah. And good breakdown though. Interesting stuff. MC asking, do you worry about Daddy Sanders? I do. I've been vocal about this. Yeah, I do.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what that's going to look like, but ultimately he's said what he's going to do in terms of he's going to be heavily involved. He's going to be dad. I don't know really what that means. And maybe there's a world where he's perfectly content to be in Cleveland, but I don't get that sense. And even if he is, does it devolve into a LeVar Ball situation? That's not to say that he's going to do it the same way, but it's in the sense that it's very easy to put a microphone in front of his face and get something from him that's going to be about, what's going on with his kid in the NFL. And
whenever you want, whenever.
And that becomes whether somebody puts a microphone in his face or he just does it himself, that becomes very easy to be potentially disruptive. And at that point, like, he could very easily get somebody fired from that standpoint. Or the inverse is also true, where he could make it so he poisons the place he's playing for his son. Now, I think he has more savvy than sort of a LeVar Ball did. But even if he's just dividing, the fan base or whatever sides, I could see that being a problem. And again, I say this as like, Cleveland is remarkably not online in terms of their players. Like, people will complain about tweets. People do not complain about Myles Garrett's podcast or, Deshaun Watson's like the most online player on the team, and he's still like not involved. It's not like Micah Parsons, who has a show every week. And there's a lot of people like this in the league who have a show every week, and everything they say is dissected and parsed and everything. And that becomes a bigger thing. Like, the Browns are relatively quiet from that standpoint compared to most every other team in the league. And even with Deshaun Watson, his stuff stopped, when they got to really practicing, and then obviously no one cares anymore. So it's never going to happen again. But like, those are things you have to take into consideration. And I don't know how that would fly here or really anywhere else. I mean, if you're a rookie quarterback, like if Baker Mayfield was, if it's, Baker Mayfield is a rookie quarterback, the Browns should take him number 1 overall in 2024, he might have a podcast. That might be the world you now live in. I don't know, but like, those are all considerations that you have to have with the presence that is Deion Sanders, which could be positive, could be a negative, but it's going to be a factor.
Yeah, 100% will be a factor. No question. He will be impacting his his presence in whatever city he lands in, one way or the other. So that's for sure. All right, let's get to our first video of the night here on the React. This is the Fitz and Witt show. Ryan Fitzpatrick and Andrew Whitworth in the joy of Jameis, as they were there for the call Thursday Night Football in Cleveland, talking about the game, the Browns win over the Steelers, and Jameis in general. Let's see here. What we got going on? There we go. All right. Here we go.
Cleveland, man. It was epic, but going into it, we see the game on our schedule, 2-8 Browns. The weather looks like it's going to be absolutely awful. Rain, wintry mix, cold, all kinds of wind. And it ended up being what I think is the best game that we've had in our 3 years of doing TNF. Would you agree with that or no?
I think it was definitely the most fun. I mean, I don't know that I walked away from a game that we've done, and in the hotel lobby afterwards, everybody was like in such a good mood and had such a blast. It just felt like one of those epic games that, like, man, you came in pouting the whole ride over. We're flying out there. Everybody's moaning and groaning about doing the game. And you leave there and you go, I love this place. What an awesome game. What an awesome electric atmosphere. Those fans and everything. It was sick.
Yeah, and I would say going from no snow and actually pretty good weather in the first half to coming out in the second half and there being essentially a whiteout. You could just see, I mean, the interest in the game was incredible after that. The biggest thing for me and my biggest takeaway, yes, Jameis, yes, the way that Cleveland battled, but the Browns fans, I expected a few things. I expected to see a lot more Steelers fans because the Browns obviously 2-8 going into the game, bad weather. Hey, let's give up our seats and Pittsburgh's going to take over the stadium. We've seen that a lot of times in our careers in different places we've played. That didn't happen. And then as the game went on, as the weather got worse, there wasn't an empty seat. It didn't matter if it was lower level, didn't matter if it was upper level. the Browns fans live for that weather and live for those moments. And I walked away from that thing so impressed by Cleveland.
It was, dude. That was insane. I mean, really, honestly, it's multiple times we've been there now and had an epic moment happen. I think that I got a whole new respect for that city and their fandom behind sports. And then obviously your boy, Jameis gave us another one, man. You told me about it. You said, hey, look, Jameis is one of those guys, like, it is what it is. Like, that is just authentically who he is. And you're like, there's no way this has got to be rehearsed or practiced or something. He gave us another amazing pregame speech. What is it? The horse is prepared for the battle, but victory comes from the Lord.
Oh, my God. That one was probably rehearsed, but it was more
Yeah.
it was when Kaylee asked him about playing in the snow, and his face just lit up like a Christmas tree. It's who he is, man. And I'll tell you what, a funny story about the green room. So I was the only one that picked Cleveland. I went lone wolf.
You did.
Feeling pretty good about that. But the green room in the second half, it felt to me like Rocky IV. We're in Russia. It's the 12th round, and Rocky has now won over the crowd. The green room was chanting for the Browns to win this game because everybody wanted Jameis on the desk.
Look, we're super competitive. You know that. I mean, listen, we get into this every week. Y'all see us make our picks, but in the green room, it gets heated. I mean, Carissa will drop a couple every now and then. She gets mad when her team's not going to win. And I'm telling you, that game was heated at the first half. And then it's exactly how you describe it. In the second half, it's like all of a sudden everyone's cheering for Jameis for this epic moment for them to win this game. No one gave a crap about the picks anymore. It's like, we want this dude on the desk. We want him to have a chance to just talk to him, ask him questions. He'd won us all over. There's no doubt about that. I mean, authentic joy, man, just the passion and joy he plays the game with. We talk about leadership, people you want to walk in a room with. You want to walk in a room with Jameis Winston. I mean, that's the kind of guy he is.
There's no doubt. And he didn't disappoint when he came onto the desk. But I think you see it, when you play your former teams, as Jameis did recently against the Saints, the amount of guys that came up to him after the game, giving him hugs, loving up on him. Same thing when he plays Tampa. All those guys have so much respect for him. And it's what you touched on, the authenticity. He's the same guy every day. He's a goofball. He's a clown, but he loves football. He works his ass off. And all of that, some of the things he talked about on the desk really come through in the way that he leads. So that was a lot of fun. And then towards the tail end, those interviews start winding down. And it was like, how are we going to finish this interview with Jameis? What's the perfect way to cap it off? And you had a wonderful idea of diving off the desk and doing Snow Angels.
Well, it just felt like the right moment, right? We're in Cleveland. Nobody wanted to be here to start. We ended up with snow, our first full snow game. We had Jameis Winston. The way he played, how electric all that atmosphere was. It was like, hey, I asked the producer, hey, is it okay if we go to Snow Angels? He's like, dude, don't ask, go. And I said, Jameis, will you do a Snow Angel with us? And he went first. I was shocked how fast he was like, let's do this. It was like he'd been thinking about it too. And we dove off, man. I went in there head first. I must be feeling pretty good. I don't know if I've ever dove like that on Grant. I don't know. I can think, as a big fella, you don't do that very often. I must have been feeling like a little kid in the moment. I went just, you know what? I dove headfirst in the snow, like I was 12 years old myself.
That's the power of Jameis right there. That is the power of Jameis. The two comments that I got the most of, one was, why didn't Tony do it? And we just got to explain. Look, Tony's got a condition when he gets cold. He's got a condition. His fingers and his toes don't work. His mouth sometimes stops working, and he gets really grumpy. So he was being Scrooge over there. Then the second one, I was getting a lot of flack, and I think you started this way too, or maybe Jameis did, the face down Snow Angel instead of rolling over to the back and doing it. I don't know. I grew up in Arizona.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What's
You never
can you
done
explain?
I betted a lot of snow. I don't know.
Okay.
I was enjoying myself a little bit. But the best, there's a video that comes out of it, and we'll have to put this video up at some point. But we start having a snowball fight, and there's video. Your first throw, I don't know if it was errant. I don't know if it didn't
Jameis
mean
is eating
to.
dubs.
You threw your snowball right into Jameis's crotch from like point blank range. I'm going back to the story of you being a gooser under the pile, thinking, my gosh, you were playing dirty with snowballs too.
Hey man, listen, you gotta have a little fun. I was trying to throw it. I actually was about to hit him with it, and then I realized the cameras were filming his face. And I was like, I went from throwing it in his face to trying to like let it go and went straight to the crotch with it. But you know what? Hey, I've never been claimed to be a quarterback.
Yeah, he rallied.
He'll be all right. But listen, that was epic. It was really cool. The whole game, everything, the snow, everything. I think we all walked out of there as like, man, what a week. But also another positive to the week, Fitz. Accountability check. We got our 10,000 steps, baby.
We
Come
did
on.
it.
It was 30-something degrees. It was windy. We lucked out. There was no rain. We did get a little sleet here and there. We got over 5 miles in. We went kind of toured around the West Side Market. Unfortunately, it's closed on Thursdays. We made a tour of downtown. We got the Rock Hall of Fame in. You did a little, band music with some people. That was pretty fun.
Yeah, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was super fun. I played the tambourine.
Yeah, you did a great job. I thought you had some great enthusiasm.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Fitz and Wit. Fitzpatrick is friends with, pretty close with Jameis, I think. Off the field, I think they are very good friends. So cool to see it, Whitworth continuously talking about how miserable they all were to come to Cleveland, which is unfortunate.
Played a decade for the Bengals. He's been here a lot.
Yeah.
It's not an endorsement of Thursday Night Football based on the fact that this was the best game they've had
ever.
That's not what you want to hear if you're Amazon. The whole snow thing, like Joe Thomas had said that Buffalo game where they won 9-6 was his. So between him and Joel Bitonio, they've had 2 of these in 20 years. So like, if you're like, oh, I'm all, these are rare in part because what has to happen? The ground has to be not frozen when you start.
It has to stick.
The snow goes because then you keep your footing's a little bit better. And then it just sort of piles up very quickly in short order, and you can sort of get that type of game. Otherwise, it becomes miserable, as the Saints game was, and some of these other ones. So please, while I want the Haslams to pay for the whole thing, none of this diminished my interest in getting players to play on better field inside of a dome. But yeah, I mean, like, the Browns were fun. I mean, and you're getting the same effect you had when Joe Flacco was in at quarterback. Anyone but Deshaun Watson, and people have fun with the Browns. And it's the same effect where people, they said it themselves, and some of that was just a moment, whatever. But like they found themselves rooting for the Browns. Like we saw it happen last year, again this year. And when Deshaun Watson's not on the field, people like this team a whole lot more. It's not difficult to figure out why. And it's obviously going to help ensure that they're never going back, which has been something that was obvious the moment he went down with the Achilles injury. But yeah, I mean, it's always good when you can have, the Cleveland in general, but certainly the Browns get positive, praise from some of these guys that enjoy coming here. Like the Whitworth set of digs is all too common. I don't want to go to Cleveland, and then I get there and I had more fun than I thought I would. That happens with players who sign here all the time. There are any number of players who don't want to come to Cleveland, and then they do it, and then they're like, "This was a great decision." Or some of them just decide, "I'm going to live here after my professional career is over." I don't expect Andrew Whitworth is going to be one of those people, but whatever.
Yeah. So, it was interesting. We talked a little bit before the show, Pickens with his quote after the game, that the weather, affected him, or was the reason the Browns won, and they're not a very good football team and all this stuff. Whatever, who cares? It's Pickens. And then, we talked a little bit about Tomlin's game management too, and he's getting a lot of heat for this game in the weather. Is specifically taking the deep ball shot with Fields late in the game, even the 2-quarterback system in general. And then also his usage of timeouts down the stretch. Fields made a huge play in the game, the first one he was in, but them electing to then throw the ball down the field with him on a critical 3rd and 4 was questionable, I would say. You probably want to have Russ in there to throw that deep ball. And then also we talked about the time management with that, change your mind 3 different times on the penalty, and then calling a timeout with a non-running clock at that point is just a critical mistake. And then not calling timeout when the Browns are on the 1-yard line and letting the clock run, I think, was also second guessed a lot as well.
So yeah, I don't really care about Fields throwing the ball. I mean, he had made the big play, and some of that was literally 2 Browns players sort of tripped over each other because of the weather. But like, if you got the sense that the Browns were, going to attack Fields with everything they had and was going to give you an open shot, if it pays off, it's a great play. And it's one of those things like, I remember how pissed off people got when Jacoby Brissett came in, quote unquote, cold to throw a wide open pass. They just didn't connect it. But had it worked, it would have been brilliant. That's the difference between success and failure. But Mike Tomlin butchered the first half at the end of the clock. At the end of the first half, clock management, and then he was really bad in the second half. You mentioned it in terms of accepting a penalty with a stopped clock, getting it to be 3rd and 7, and then having to call timeout because for whatever reason your defense wasn't what it was supposed to be. That's a huge blunder. Beyond that, you got in the post game, Kevin Stefanski comes out. They're like, "Hey, would you have kicked that?" He's like, "No chance. There's no way I was kicking that." And if from a Browns perspective, you're sitting there, of course there's no chance. Dustin Hopkins hasn't made anything in weeks, so of course they're not going to do that. But in that sense, Mike Tomlin now gives you 2 shots to get the first down. They only needed the 1, going from 4th and what would have been about 2, maybe a long 1, depending on how you want to look at it, to 3rd and 6 or 7, depending on whose measurement you were using. They get it in 1. And then on Mike Tomlin's side, he goes, I was worried about the field goal. Straight up, I wanted to make sure that that they would have a longer kick. So you got, just right after the game, you got a complete difference of evaluating the situation. Kevin Stefanski didn't throw Dustin Hopkins under the bus because he's not going to do that. But he did point out that, just the weather, going into the dog pound, the wind at that end of the field were all reasons. If they were going to kick it, they wanted to get super close. And the reality was they never kicked, which, given the circumstances, was the best possible play on that whole thing. But yes, Mike Tomlin, handling of the clock, certainly didn't do himself any favors by taking off about 40 seconds each half, which, limited what they were able to do, because at the end of the first half, they moved the ball pretty well and just ran out of time. And then the end of the second half, they moved the ball pretty well and just ran out of time. There's a sort of rule of thumb where, like, if relative to like how you're trying to plan out how many plays you're going to have, the argument is if you have a timeout, obviously that every one of those is a play, and then 15 seconds. So if you allow 40 seconds to go off the clock, you're basically allowing like 3 plays to go off the clock, which is, enormous given the circumstances that Mike Tomlin was willing to do that. He wanted to save the timeout for who knows why, but there was there's no situation where it didn't matter that, if they completed a ball down the field, and even if, an offensive lineman had to somehow run up from some ridiculous distance, it was never going to take that long. So you are killing yourself just on math in those circumstances. So yeah, this was a game, and Kevin Stefanski and company were not perfect, but he's generally done a pretty good job of managing clock, managing the game in general. He did better than certainly better than Tomlin. Did relatively well overall, even though there was one play. There's some criticism that when they ran the ball and scored with Chubb, that they left too much time on the play clock there. You get in some of that minutia, and yes, there's always ways you can improve, but like contrasting one versus the other, Kevin Stefanski was easily better in that circumstance, and that may have been the difference in the game ultimately.
Yeah, it some big mistakes on the stretch. A ultimately very fun game, as they talked about, and we'll hear about more here on our second video. This is Rich Eisen. What the Browns showed in the snow game upset of the Steelers.
It's interesting that George Pickens doesn't think the Steelers are equipped for bad weather. I think that's a huge problem they have to address, and they're going to have to do a lot of soul searching to figure that one out.
Yeah, especially considering, in the playoffs, you could end up in Buffalo, Kansas City, any number of places where.
Well, according to George Pickens, they are not ready. So these are things they have to worry about. Now, it's, some grace. This is one of the reasons I want the Browns to have a dome. If you are the worst team, weather can be an equalizer. This is one of those things. One of the reasons people like weather games for the Browns is because that has helped them in more circumstances than it has hurt them. In fact, in most of the time, the worst team has won these games as far as the Browns are concerned, whether it was that Buffalo game way back when, or the Saints game where the Saints were the worst team and they beat the Browns. If you are a good team, you want weather not to be as big of a factor. But nevertheless, yes, Pittsburgh is going to play in more weather games, and as you mentioned, could play. If in the postseason, could travel to Buffalo or Kansas City. It's a shame they're ill-equipped for those games and will lose.
Yes,
per George Pickens.
Well, and my opinion as well. Don't see this team making a long run. All right, here we go. Rich Eisen.
For a sec. You just heard Mike Tomlin say that it took some time for the Steelers to warm up to the action.
What the hell does that mean?
Just started slow.
Okay.
His press conferences are really interesting. He's not afraid to say the thing. But yeah, that was his way of saying they did not get off to a good start. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, the action came in the form of the Grim Reaper, Myles Garrett, who was a game wrecker in the first half. 3 sacks, all of them in the first half. 3 quarterback hits, 3 tackles for loss, and a forced fumble on Russell Wilson. He's the only player in the NFL with multiple games of 3 or more sacks this year. How about that? And he's now the 7th player with 10 or more sacks in at least 7 straight seasons.
Pretty good.
He's now tied Lawrence Taylor, DeMarcus Ware, Bruce Smith, and Jared Allen in those regards, trailing only John Randall and Reggie White. 4th player with 10 or more sacks in at least 7 of his first 8 seasons. This guy's going to the Hall of Fame. He won't have to go too far to see his bust in Ohio. 98.5 career sacks now. 5th most by any player in the first 8 seasons. He ranks, in this regard, 5th for the most sacks the first 8 seasons. You know who's 4th is TJ Watt. So everybody just remember this snow globe game when both of these guys were on the field. And then you got Nick Chubb, man, who, despite all of his knee problems, last night, with his 2 touchdowns, became the 3rd player in Browns franchise history with 50 or more career rushing touchdowns. The others are named Leroy Kelly and Jim Brown. Come on now. Talk about etching your name in team lore. Did you hear what Kevin Stefanski said after the game?
No.
Oh, gosh, this is a good soundbite. Although I know it's going to lead to, you guys having some fun at my expense. This is Kevin Stefanski about the great Nick Chubb afterwards.
Yeah, I've run out of superlatives for Nick, honestly, and he's my favorite player on the team. You can tell everybody else has said that. I have a favorite kid, too. She's not here. But Nick does the right thing all the time, and to see what he's gone through to come back and put himself where he is, just to be back playing in the first place, and then to be back out there and performing like he's performing, scoring for this football team when we need him the most. He's a special player, but he's a great person.
Interesting.
Kevin Stefanski has 3 children, just in case anybody wants to know.
Yeah.
Don't even say it. Don't say it. Don't say it. You can't say it because you have 1 child. Don't even say it.
He has a favorite kid.
Don't even say it.
Oh, interesting.
Sometimes things that are understood don't need to be said.
No. And I knew playing that soundbite would
kid.
lead to this.
And he has a favorite player.
This action of you two guys coming around the edges, and I have no tackle protection.
Listen, we know
right now.
We know Tay-Tay's your favorite.
Stop
we know
it.
Del Tufo's your
Stop
favorite.
it.
It's okay to admit things.
Del Tufo and Tay-Tay.
No, I don't have a
fine.
favorite child. I don't know what he's talking about. But I thought it was an interesting soundbite to play.
Weird.
And leave it at that.
Well, you know we can't leave it at that.
She's not here, said Kevin. He's got 3 children.
So does Rich.
All right.
So he probably has 2 boys and a girl like
Right.
someone else that I know.
And I bet you the daughter is the youngest.
And the daughter's probably the youngest.
Yeah.
I think you guys,
The
let's talk.
youngest one
I think
and
you guys need to
girls.
talk football.
Sure. I mean, we can talk everything.
How about this one, too? The
You didn't deny
Browns
Del Tufo was
just
your
snapped
favorite.
the Steelers' 5-game win streak last night. You know what they did a couple weeks ago? Let me give you the exact. In week 8, you know what they did? They snapped the Ravens' 5-game win streak.
All right.
Oh.
They have become.
Who are they playing next week?
Hold on.
The streak is on.
A
hold on,
5-game
hold
win
on.
streak?
Denver. They're at Denver.
Denver, okay.
Denver.
Not a 5-game win streak.
They could have a 2 or 3 game.
Not
win, I guess.
not a 5-game win streak for Denver.
all right.
Just 2. Would have been 3 had they beaten Kansas City. Had they gotten that field goal. But anyway, the point is this: there's only one team in the Super Bowl era since the '70 merger to be below 500 and snap 2 divisional opponents' 5 or better game win streaks in the same season. That's the Cleveland Browns of 2024.
Wow.
4th team of any record to snap 2 divisional opponents of a 5 or better game win streak in the same season. So they're now 2-2 under Jameis, which does lead to the question. We can ask it. It's lowest of low-hanging fruit. What if they had just read the writing on the Deshaun Watson wall back in early October? Don't forget, Jameis was 3rd string on this team.
Yeah.
But all of us sitting in this room, and we don't bring stuff up just to say we were right. We also don't bring up stuff that we're wrong about too often. But that said, we all saw, man.
Felt like we were saying this for a
Come
while.
on, man.
Yeah.
We were all sitting here saying, what if they start Jameis? I don't know. Does Amari Cooper get traded? Is he on? I know there was a financial stuff and contractual stuff at play here too. But Jameis just has a certain way about him, guys. Jerry Jeudy has come alive. 6 catches, 85.
It's an interesting question, right? So, hypothetically, say they go to Jameis earlier and they win some more games. They probably don't trade Amari. But trading Amari has been a net positive, I would say, because of what you've gotten from Cedric Tillman and Jerry Jeudy, especially. Like Jeudy isn't averaging 95 yards per game over his last 4 or 5, whatever it is, if Coop's here, right? And same thing for Tillman, is not getting the looks that he's getting if Cooper's here.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think Amari Cooper got more in the trade because a lot of people were putting his poor play on Deshaun Watson. But you have to remember the amount of plays that Amari Cooper left on the field that were not anyone else but Amari Cooper. So if, let's say, Jameis started from the word go and the Browns looked better, they have let's say they're even around 500, whatever. If Amari Cooper is still making those mistakes and dropping some of those balls, and obviously the one against the Raiders was the penalty, which is still a crap call, but obviously took that big touchdown off the board. But like against Dallas, he drops that ball right on the goal line. I don't even remember which game it was where he dropped the ball straight up into an interception. Like there were a lot of those plays where you sit there going, Amari Cooper doesn't look good. And a lot of people were criticizing Amari Cooper, suggesting, I don't think he's as fast as he was last year, or whatever. So in some ways, it sort of worked out for the Browns from that standpoint. Obviously, I think the Browns would be much happier to be firmly in the mix for the playoffs.
Sure.
But to get the 3rd round pick they got, I think from that standpoint, very good. And then, not only to get whatever pick swap, that nets them the 3rd round pick, but to get Jerry Jeudy to look like the dude that Andrew Berry traded for and is worth the contract extension, to get Cedric Tillman to look like a guy that, that can lock down that X as a starter, to get more looks for Elijah Moore, who's looked pretty good. And I think the Browns should be looking to keep him at least one more year. That part has been really interesting, that because I don't think anyone's going to suggest that Amari Cooper was a negative influence on anyone, but it just happened to work out in a way that Amari Cooper was not playing well. Yeah. Obviously, Deshaun Watson was awful. And then things played out the way they did. The Browns trade Amari Cooper to Buffalo. He seems to be doing fine there. The Bills are continuing to win. He's going to get a shot in the playoffs. More power to him. I have nothing but admiration for Amari Cooper in the time the Browns had him here. The Browns got a profit off of Amari Cooper in his time here. And then yet Amari Cooper is gone. And one of the position groups most people feel best about right now is none other than wide receiver, which is not where most people would have expected without Amari Cooper on this team. So it's an interesting what if. It's hard to know which games they would have won. I think Jacksonville, they would have won more comfortably. I think, I'd like to think they'd beat the Raiders. But again, Deshaun Watson played well enough to win that game. Everybody else sort of let him down. And maybe the Giants game they win because Jameis is just more willing to get the ball out and do some of those things. So those are the easiest sort of examples to pick out. But, they've lost close games. They've lost a number of close games. And maybe that would have been enough of a difference. But it is what it is. And ultimately, I think the net sort of reality of this whole situation is, one, Deshaun Watson's never going to be back in any meaningful form. And then the Browns didn't forget how to play football. The Watson factor and the injuries just were really bad for them coming into this season and has really held them back. But if everybody was healthy relative to where they were supposed to be healthy, and Jameis Winston came in playing like this, it would have been essentially the extension of, it would have been as if Joe Flacco, was starting the whole year. Yeah. Obviously Jameis has the advantage of being a decade younger. But I think that's sort of, it would have just kept going in that way.
Yeah. Dude, MC says, hit the like and subscribe button down below. You're watching the React. I saw the question in the chat here, Pete, about Amari Cooper. How is he doing in Buffalo? He has 7 catches.
He missed
for 100.
He missed a bunch of time with an injury.
Yes.
Yeah. So when he finally got on the field, he scored a touchdown, and I don't even know. I never even looked into what was allegedly said. I suspect it was a smaller deal than what people wanted to make it into. But he's missed most of the time there with an injury to his wrist. And obviously, if you're the Bills, you're fine. All you're really worried about is getting Cooper healthy and on the same page in time for the postseason. But it's not. I think if the Bills don't win the Super Bowl, they're going to come back and go, I don't know about that trade unless they re-sign him.
Yeah.
If they re-sign him, it won't feel as big. But I think if the Bills they go out in the second round this year or the first round, let's say second round, and Amari Cooper is fine or whatever, but they don't get any further than they have been. They can't get over the hump. I think they're going to look back and go, man, we lost a top 100 pick for this. I genuinely think that was a big bargain for the Browns. And the Bills were aggressive in a way that they wanted to make sure they got their guy, didn't want to have to wait till the trade deadline or anything else. I totally understand it from their standpoint, but it will feel pricey.
Yeah, 7 for 124 and a touchdown. Now the first week he went over there, he played they played the Titans. He had 4 catches for 66 yards and a touchdown. If you recall, that was 1 week after the Eagles game where he had 4 for 42 for us. And then he played the next week in the Seahawks game, which might have been when he got hurt or further hurt, because he had 1 reception for 3 yards that game. Then he missed, I think he missed a week or 2. And then in their latest, or on the 17th against the Chiefs, he had 2 receptions for 55 yards with a long of 30. So he's only had 7 catches in 3 games. Like you said, they're probably trying to get him healthy at this point for their stretch run. But those are the stats for those of you asking. Interesting. His comment was, something to the effect of, "I haven't felt this kind of joy after a win," which is total nonsense, because if you recall his reactions after the Ravens win last year, that's the most expressive I've ever seen Cooper. In my
I
life.
suspect he enjoyed the game where he had 250 million yards.
Yeah,
and a couple of touchdowns. I'm going to go out on a limb and say he had fun and enjoyed that one.
Might have liked that one. Record-breaking performance.
But like I said, I have nothing but I'm thrilled for Amari Cooper. Was great here for 2 years. Had a ton of production. The Browns come out with a profit. He gets to go to a place that's good for him. Great. I'm all for that. Just like I'm happy for Z in Detroit. I got no bad feelings about either of them. The Browns did, got value out of them and then moved on as they should have.
Yeah. Agreed.
Of receiving yards in the last 4 games. He's averaging almost 95 yards per game.
Yeah, Jerry Jeudy's balling low key.
It's not low key. He's just balling. Low key because I guess nobody's talking about it. Because the team's 3-8. Just think about it this way: the difference between feeling 3-8 in the NFL, the Browns, where they're bouncing off the walls, feeling good about themselves. The Jets are also 3-8. How are they feeling?
Not.
And by the way, Stefanski, the whole business is you're going to get fired. No way. Get out of here. he would be hired in the proverbial 5 minutes.
Huh.
So. Hey,
Heard
Browns,
that
you could sit here thinking about what might have been or just revel in what you're doing right now. Finish up strong. See what you can do over your final 6.
Yeah, play spoiler.
They certainly can with Pittsburgh, who they face in the final game of the season.
Although they're in that weird spot. They really need a quarterback, and they really need to be in the top 5 of this draft. And if they keep winning games, they're not.
My bad. It's Baltimore they play in the final game of the season. They play Pittsburgh in a couple of weeks. Denver, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Cincinnati, Miami, Baltimore. Every single one of those teams has opportunities to either solidify their playoff positioning or try and come from a deep hole to make the playoffs. And the Browns are standing in each one of their ways. And, 9-8 wouldn't be a bad record to finish and see what happens.
Okay.
Certainly if you've got a...
Easy. All right. The thing he mentioned is really interesting that I forgot about. So he's talked about the fact the Browns ended 2 5-game winning streaks, which is impressive. And I remember one of the complaints about Kevin Stefanski is he doesn't win big games or whatever. He doesn't beat playoff teams. But, obviously he's done that. But last year, when they beat the 49ers with P.J. Walker at quarterback in a game-winning drive, at that point, the 49ers were considered the best team in football.
Yeah.
And obviously, they ultimately went to the Super Bowl. Then, when they beat the Ravens in Week 10, they were considered the best team in football. And and in that game, they beat them on the road. But winning that game, the Ravens were considered the best team in football. So between last year doing those 2 things and then this year taking out not only 2 teams that were on 5-game winning streaks, but teams that were in first place in their division at the time they beat them. So when Baltimore got hot, the Browns took them out. I think that were they 7-2 at that point or something like that. But anyway,
yes,
they beat them, knocked them off, and then the Steelers were 8-2 going into this game in first place. Baltimore had stumbled, had lost to the Steelers, and the Browns took them out. That has been sort of a habit for them. So, like, again, you're going to look at this season and be disappointed. Now, don't get me wrong. I'd be thrilled if they go 9-8. Absolutely thrilled. I don't think it's going to happen, but I love the idea. I like the energy, and I specifically love it contrasted against his crappy Jets. But the fact is, the Browns are a pain in the ass, and a lot of that is Kevin Stefanski and the culture that certain people in media around Cleveland don't believe exists. But like, that is who they are. They're a team that can go against anybody and win. And they are also right now, and this was true last year too, they were a team that could go and lose to anybody as well. They lost, they've lost the team, the Broncos game being one example. But they've lost games to teams that they had no business losing to either. Unfortunately, that is where they are right now in terms of consistency, but you have to at least applaud them in terms of the sense that they are pesky, that they are always, you have to give them a puncher's chance against everybody. And for all these people who don't like Kevin Stefanski and his stoicism, like they are sort of a, they've always got a puncher's chance. They've always got a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. They've always got this ability to sort of rise up and play at this level that, one would think, who cares? Like, don't ask Kevin Stefanski to validate your emotions as a fan or a media member, but his team plays like the type of team you want the Browns to play like in terms of their attitude, in terms of how they approach these teams, how they're able to rise up and play these teams. Because, like, for the longest time, it was the Browns can't hire a head coach who can beat the Steelers and the Ravens and the Bengals. At this point, I don't even know what his record is. I know the Browns are killing the Steelers at home. They're not doing well in Pittsburgh. He owns the Bengals, and then he has been a consistent thorn in the side of the Ravens as well. Even in their case, winning in M&T Bank Field. I don't know, I don't know if he's 500 against the Ravens and the Steelers. He's got to be damn close. Obviously, his record overwhelmingly positive against the Bengals overall. So his overall divisional record against the teams you need to be able to compete with, Kevin Stefanski understands how to play in the AFC North. He understands how to beat the AFC North teams, even when he doesn't have the perfect scenario or all the talent in the world he wants. They somehow manage to figure it out.
Yeah. I heard somewhere, who said it? I don't know. I heard somewhere 7-2 under Stefanski at home against the AFC North.
Yeah. And one of those is obviously the Ravens last year at home, the DTR game. And it wouldn't surprise me if the other one is also a Baltimore Ravens game. No, was it Cincinnati this year?
They lost.
Was that was in Cleveland, was it not?
Yes.
So there you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, they get it done at home real well. And then the two games they lost were Deshaun Watson's final act, and the other one was DTR and his first ever start, finding out the day of the game that he was going to be the starter. So, pretty good.
Yeah. So Stefanski's record versus divisions, AFC North, he's 11-11. So that means on the road he's 2-7 against the North. But I know his home record is spectacular. He's 7-0 against the AFC South, 0-6 against the AFC East, 1-6 against the AFC West, 3-1 against the NFC North, 2-2 against the NFC South, 5-0 against the NFC East, and 0-1 against the NFC West.
He's not 5-0 against the NFC East. Those must be from before this year. He has lost all the games of the NFC East.
Yeah, this is last year's. October of last year. So,
all right. So there's a couple other games in there, but overall, still,
does
really well at home. Not as good on the road, which is sort of understandable. But like, if I'm going to choose one or the other, I'd rather they take care of business at home.
Yeah, his home record is very, very good. So,
Yep.
yeah, I know that, especially with last year where they were would they lose? Were they undefeated at home last year or lost one game?
They lost one
One. So
to the Ravens. They lost to the Ravens. That was their one home loss. They had the second best home record in the league, or maybe been tied for the best. Dallas may have lost in the end. They had been undefeated all year, but I think Dallas had played one fewer game at home, or something along those. But the Browns played the max number of games at home last year and were 8-1.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, good stuff. You know, it's interesting, you know, how quickly the national perspective can change on a team, though, on a national game, right? Like, they were obviously it's a Thursday night game, but you know, in preparing for the show, there's just endless amounts of national video takes from that Thursday night game, obviously, because it was an epic game with the weather and everything. But people speaking positively about the Browns now that they beat the Ravens and the Steelers in the last month is crazy. You know, it's just crazy. And recognizing that, hey, maybe if it wasn't Watson for 8 weeks, where would this team be? So.
Yep, but you know, and hopefully, you know, that was enough. That we're not even going to have this conversation, even though people keep insisting on trying to have it, just because the Browns won't trash Watson, because they're not going to do that. But it's over.
We're going to get to that right here, actually. Albert Breer came out with this report prior to Thursday night. You're watching the React on the OBR Streaming Network. Hop on over to youtube.com/Orange and Brown Report. Hit like and subscribe. Tell a friend to pop in and check out the show. They'll like it. It's coming, Chris. And then, so Breer had this report before the game, and now Thursday night, or before the Thursday night, this is post after the game on his little show he does. First segment talking about his report and the game in general. Let's hit on this, and then we've got a couple more to go.
Like it was dead in the water and almost lifeless a few weeks ago. Jameis has brought new life to them. All right, welcome into the Breer Report for November the 22nd. Week 12 is underway. Thursday Night Football last night, a wildly entertaining game. That's where we're going to start this morning's Breer Report, that Browns-Steelers game, which before we get into the particulars with the teams, I just love watching at least a few of those every year. I'm not saying I want every game to play out that way or every game to be played in that sort of setting, but you know, obviously the aesthetics on TV are incredible. And beyond just that, I just love how hard everything is. Everything is difficult. Everything is complicated. When, you know, you put pro athletes in that sort of setting, you see them sort of humanized in a way. And so just getting to see the degree of difficulty in getting things done, and how difficult it was for the Steelers to come back from a 2-score deficit, and how difficult it was for the Browns to answer them after that, and having to convert, you know, the 3rd and 7, the sideline throw to Jerry Jeudy near the end of that game. It was just great in every single way. And, you know, again, like, I'm not saying I want to see every game played that way. Of course I don't. But that sort of setting for football, it just looks beautiful on TV, and having to see pro athletes accomplish things at that degree of difficulty is awesome too. Just loved it all the way around. I hope we get a few more of them over the course of the next couple of months. I wish the Browns wouldn't build a dome. I know why they're doing it, and we're seeing more northern teams go that way. The Bears could wind up in a dome also here in the next 10 years or so. But I really love football and the elements. I love the elements being a factor. I love seeing which teams can survive and thrive in the elements, and all that stuff was on display last night. So A+. Even if it wasn't, again, like the most artistic football game, everything else about it was fantastic. And love to see it. Hopefully we get a couple more of those here through the rest of the regular season and maybe one or two in the playoffs. All right. So getting into the game itself. I really have two main things I take away from this. Number one, the Steelers are going to be fine. Their defense is still really good. They had some issues protecting, of course, with Myles Garrett having the night that he did, and their offensive line did have some issues blocking the Browns front. I tend to think they're going to be okay. And I don't look at this as any sort of black mark on what they've already accomplished. They came into the game 8-2. They leave it with 3 losses. The schedule is tough down the stretch. We knew that coming in. I still think the Steelers are a really good team. The Browns, I think there are a couple of things you can take from this. And there were a couple of things that I reported on our pregame show on Amazon that, I think we can revisit here. Number one, the plan is to add competition to the quarterback room in 2025. And while the overwhelming likelihood is that Deshaun Watson's going to be on the roster next year, they do plan on either through the draft or free agency adding another competitive piece. And then number two, barring anything crazy happening, the plan is to have Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski back running the football operation in 2025.
All right. We got to talk about this. So this was the report, right? Competition with Watson. So I guess I should probably let it play. He kind of explains it a little bit more to what he meant here. Hang on.
I think this game showed elements of why on both counts. Just as far as adding something to the quarterback room, adding competition to the quarterback room. And really the way that they've done it the last couple of years, they put people in that quarterback room to lift Deshaun Watson up. It's part of the reason why Joe Flacco isn't there anymore. Next year, the plan will be to look hard at adding somebody who can compete for the job. Again, whether that's through free agency or through the draft. And I think, some of the reasons why are underscored with the spark that Jameis Winston's given them. Has he been perfect? Absolutely not. But, you saw in that game against the Ravens a few weeks ago, you saw last night that the team really rallies around him. And
all right. So he mentions that they've attempted to prop him up, right? And that his report is that they will bring in competition for him. So they're no longer going to try to tiptoe around the situation for him and bring in competition. I find this to be insane, Pete. What competition? First of all, what quarterback, say it's not Winston, right? Say it's somebody else. What quarterback is going to want to come in and you got to tell me he's going to have to compete for the job against the worst quarterback in the history of football to win a job? I mean, that's insane. And is this just a nice way of saying, of the Browns saying, we're moving on?
Yes, 100%. It's the same way when Andrew Berry was asked at the press conference, is Deshaun Watson going to be your start? Is he going to start again next year? And it's always a possibility. That's no. That is no.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he would have said yes. The competition is going to be over the second that guy signs pen to paper or whatever, or they draft him. Like, Deshaun Watson's not going to be able to compete for who knows how long. That's part of it. And again, some of this is just the calendar. It takes care of a lot of this on its own. Yeah. Deshaun Watson is not going to be ready in March or April. And yet free agency is going to start in March and the draft is going to happen in April. So they are going to have to do these things. And then you saw Deshaun Watson play. Competition, who are we kidding? DTR is better than Deshaun Watson by far. Jameis Winston, again, this is very court. They're not going to throw Deshaun Watson under the bus. They just aren't, because they aren't going to do that to any of their players. That's not how they operate. John Dorsey is not walking through that door to trash David Njoku at a completely unrelated thing at the combine. It's one of the reasons I cannot stand that man, because he was an idiot.
Yeah.
The Browns are a professional organization who is not going to trash their players, even when they deserve it. So they're going to say in the kindest way possible, we're moving on. They said it in the press conference. They're saying it right now. Who is anyone kidding? Who is Deshaun Watson going to beat out? Come after the way he played last year, this year, and then now adding an Achilles injury after the broken shoulder. He's had both ACLs redone. It's going to take forever for him to recover from this injury, and the Browns aren't in a hurry to see him back. He may not be in a hurry to see him back because he knows, or maybe he doesn't. He could be that delusional. He's going to get killed in that competition if he does work as hard as humanly possible to be back. He knows he's going to lose. So he's going to be a $230 million quarterback that is third string. So there's not a whole lot of incentive for him to be like, I'm ready to go. And he doesn't have much incentive to rock the boat either. So we'll see when he's actually sort of ready to go. But again, and it's his plant leg where he's going to drive off of in terms of the style of play he has. And I cannot overstate this. When he went down with an Achilles and DTR stepped into the game, DTR looked like he was running 10 times faster around the field than Deshaun Watson was. Like Deshaun Watson looked genuinely slow. And that was a big feature of his game. Wasn't that he couldn't operate from the pocket or these other things, but like he had enough juice athletically to be able to do things that he couldn't do without the injury. And now he's going to try to do it post-surgery, post-significant surgery. This is an injury that ends careers for some people. Some people do not make it back from this injury. So like they can call it whatever they want. The Browns are moving on and everybody knows it. It's just a matter of how are you going to say this in the most polite way possible? This is it. We're going to call it competition. If you have competition for a $230 million quarterback, he lost. It's over.
Right. That's what I thought. That's how I feel about it. The only thing that gives me pause, right, is, it defied all logic to continue to play him for 4 weeks this season, yet they did it.
Maybe, but it ultimately worked out the best possible way for everyone involved, honestly, because what is the best case scenario for Deshaun Watson, as much as the injury sucks? That he goes down and he can't play anymore, or that he is unceremoniously benched as one of the worst quarterbacks ever. Ultimately,
yeah, you're right.
This made life easier for the Browns. Obviously, they didn't want to have to go that route and put him on the bench, and they get to, without saying a word, just be like, well, he's hurt and we're moving on. And this is how it's going to play out, as opposed to Deshaun stays healthy the entire year, sucks. Yeah. And then we have to revisit this conversation. Well, he's healthy. He's having a great off season. We have to do all this crap. Like, now you don't. It's over. You're going to carry him on the roster in some form or fashion. Who knows? But he may be on that with a little cart thing for a while. May even pretend for a while. Who knows? But like, I don't see a scenario where he's going to be. I'm finding it really difficult that the Browns are ever going to be able to activate him. I don't know how that will work. Yeah, but like, what is he? Is he really going to travel with it? I know he's been like around the team and stuff. Whatever. More power to him. That's fine. But like, is he really going to travel with the team as the third string quarterback? These are all things where I don't know what that's all going to look like.
Doesn't he have to get his money?
I don't think so. I think there's ways around that because of the guarantees and everything else. But it may be pup as long as humanly possible before activating, which sure. Ultimately the scenario I've long thought would happen is that would give you the extra, the 4 weeks with 3 quarterbacks on the roster, and then you sort of come to some conclusion, or there's a setback or a new injury. He tripped over his dog or something, and suddenly he's out for the season again. I don't know, but I don't see a scenario where he's ever going to be anything more than third string, and even that seems difficult to believe. And like the recovery on that injury is not set in stone by any stretch, and given the challenges he's faced, it could be much longer.
They're asking in the chat how long a player can be on PUP.
I think it's just 4 weeks. the way they changed the rule, but I could be wrong. Jack Duffin's always more well-versed in terms of the various labels for that type of stuff. But
yeah,
I mean, if he's got something that just qualifies him to be put on injured reserve or if he's on the sort of the non-football injury list, and how weird machination works, like I don't know. Like ultimately, I'm working under the assumption it's 4 games.
Yeah, and if you're on the non-football injury list, I think you can be there all year or whatever.
Could be, but obviously this happened while playing, so I don't.
Yeah. What changes when the season starts or whatever? I don't know. We'll get it clarified. Either way, if he's technically injured or classified as injured, that helps the Browns as well. On the insurance side of things. So
there is that, and with the insurance stuff, Deshaun's still getting all the money.
Yes. He'll get paid, but that does help the Browns cap situation slightly.
But then the other thing you're going to get into, and this is just logistics, how are you going to divide up reps? Because every rep you give Deshaun Watson is a waste of a rep.
A waste of a rep. Yeah, you can't give him any reps.
Like I said, I think the competition will be over very quickly.
All right, good stuff. Let's finish this real quick.
He's had a way of making plays when he needs to make plays. Again, it's not perfect. There's 3-8, but for a team that seemed like it was dead in the water and almost lifeless a few weeks ago, Jameis has brought new life to them. And, I don't know they really had that life when Deshaun Watson was in there. But it does feel to me like guys like Cedric Tillman and Jerry Jeudy have really come alive with Jameis as the quarterback. So, I look at this as another reason to again go through with their plan, and the plan right now is to put another competitive piece in that room to fight for the job with Deshaun Watson as he comes back from his Achilles injury. And then the other element of this here is the idea of keeping Barry and Stefanski, which again is the plan for 2025. And I think this is another example of why. Last year, Kevin Stefanski won Coach of the Year because they made the playoffs with 5 different quarterbacks. They were down to their 4th and 5th tackles. To me, this was a night that showed, again, the resilience of the program they built in Cleveland. It's 2-8. It's cold. It's snowing. It's just really tough conditions to play a football game in all the way around. The Browns are obviously down their starting quarterback with Jameis Winston in there now. They're down 2 left tackles. It's DeJuan Jones, who'd come in and played for their former first-round pick, Jedrick Wills. Jermaine Ifedi's in there. And yet they're able to make plays on offense down the stretch. They're able to, put together a game-winning drive. And they're able to still get a really high level of play out of their best players. Denzel Ward's had a really, really good year despite being nicked up a little bit. And then Myles Garrett was fantastic again last night. And again, they're doing this on a team that's sort of playing out the string now. So I think the effort, the resourcefulness, the resilience you still see from Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski's program is a huge part of what should get them the mulligan going into next year, and why I think they'll get the mulligan going into next year, and why the plan is for right now for ownership to give them the mulligan going into next year. It's a good team. They've got good players. They've got depth. They've got resilience. Yes, the quarterback thing got fouled up. Everyone's got blood in their hands for that. Ownership, general manager, head coach, everyone's got culpability on the Deshaun Watson thing. But they've done so many other things right. And I'll be interested to see where the whole program goes in 2025 because I still think there's a really good foundation. All right, my second top.
All right. Good stuff from Albert there. Listen, go ahead. You're going to say something?
Jermaine Ifedi is OT6 for the record. They lost Jedrick Wills. They've lost DeJuan Jones. They lost before the season even started, Akeem Adeniji, and they lost James Hudson III. So with Jack Conklin being OT2 or 3, depending on how you're counting it, that makes Jermaine Ifedi OT6.
Crazy. I hate the word mulligan for them. It's that I know it's just the semantics, right? The verbiage, but I hate that the idea of they're being given a mulligan. Listen, good coaches have bad seasons. It happens. It's hard to win in the NFL. I don't know.
The only thing I would attribute a mulligan to, and they still have to own it, is the Watson thing. But
Right.
to your, I mean, look, Kyle Shanahan might be in for his third losing season in 8 years or whatever it is.
Yes.
There's a lot of Sean McVay potentially in his second losing season. There are years where it's just not your year. And in all these cases that we're talking about, the 49ers, the Rams, and the Browns, the common denominator is injuries. All those teams have been butchered by injuries, and that's the game they play. I mean, it's true of any sport, but the NFL in particular is just a game of attrition. The Steelers, meanwhile, are a team that has stayed, remarkably healthy. Even though obviously it worked out for the Browns that Alex Highsmith was not in that game, and probably would have made it, I suspect would have made the difference. But overall, their health has been remarkably good. There's an element of luck with that, where it's not your year in terms of injuries. And this has been a miserable year for the Browns. It was submarined in some ways before it ever started because of those injuries. So, I don't get caught up in it. As I've said, you either in the NFL, just the way the NFL works, you either make the playoffs or you don't. And the rest is sort of semantics to me. Yeah, 2-15 would look worse than 8-9. I get it, but ultimately, from the Browns' perspective, it's disappointing either way. They don't make the playoffs this year. It's disappointing. So at that point, it just becomes a matter of degrees, because the NFL allows for the design of the league, allows for a team to go from fourth place to first place and then back to fourth place over the course of just 2 seasons.
Do you think with the injuries, Pete, is there something to that? This is 2 straight years where it's just been out of control with the injuries. Is there something, and the Browns seem to be a franchise that is very aware of all of this stuff, right? You can point to even training camp, they ease on the side of lighter work, right, to keep guys healthy and things like that, and to a certain degree. Yet they continue to find guys injured at a high rate. Do you question, is that just bad luck? Do you chalk it up to bad luck?
I think some of it is bad luck. I think the NFL as a league tends to be risk averse in terms of practice, with a few notable exceptions. The Chiefs and the Steelers run hard practices, harder than most. And you would point to those as teams that play their guys in preseason, and people will go, well, the Browns play the guys in preseason. I still find that part stupid and unnecessary, because the Rams, I think, are a team that practices pretty hard, but don't put their guys in for preseason. I do think that practicing harder is beneficial. Yes, there is some risk. I think you can do things to control it, not taking guys all the way to the ground, quick whistles, doing those types of things, having guys who practice correctly, practice smart to reduce the amount of risk. But when it comes to things like hamstrings or joints where guys are falling with each other, there's an element of just bad luck. But I think overall, this season in particular was the softest in terms of their practices, out of necessity more than anything else.
Yeah.
By virtue of the fact that they had so many guys hurt before it even started.
Year.
But I would hope that one of the things the Browns are going to re-examine when they, take account of this season and everything that went into it. I'm sure the first thing they're going to go is, man, it sucked that we couldn't practice the way we wanted to. Well, my question would then be, how do you want to practice? And does that need to be adjusted to get better outcomes in terms of preparing guys to be ready for a grueling season, for some of the things that might be impact injuries? And again, I don't know the answer to the questions, because I'm not a medical professional.
Right.
And even if I were, it still would be me just speculating on what they're potentially dealing with. But nevertheless, I think some of these other teams who do practice harder seem to get better results. But I would say that while also saying don't put your starters in for preseason. It's stupid, an unnecessary risk, and it's currently biting the Chiefs, even though the Chiefs are in great shape overall. The Hollywood Brown thing has hurt them all year. Maybe he's going to be back soon. Hard to say, and they've dealt with their own share of injuries. Again, how much of that is, was the result of them doing things, practicing more with more physicality, and how much of that was just dumb luck. This is one of those things where the more research they can get, and they obviously have access to more of it than we do, they can do a lot more. But I think at one point the Browns got to a pretty good rhythm in terms of like trying to sort of measure out days relative to like when they could sort of project when like players were at a higher risk of like hamstring or some of these other tendon type injuries. But I do think the physicality piece needs to be improved a little bit, and certainly it can't be any lower than it was this year. This year was just an anomaly in terms of what it was doing. But yeah, I think these are questions you have to ask yourself. Can we do more to get our guys ready? Can we do more in terms of and will the Browns doing more aid them in terms of development?
Yes.
Like if the Browns and part of this is going to sort of be informed by some of the decisions they make. If the Browns were to make big investments on the offensive line in the draft, for example, let's say they come out with 3 guys in the draft. I don't think this is how it's going to work, but just to say that they may be inclined to want to get all those guys a ton of reps, more live reps. And some of this, comes down to how your roster is designed. Like I don't need Myles Garrett to get 1 million reps.
No,
I need him to get enough reps that he's going to be ready to go. Now, again, there's an argument to be had on how much that is in terms of what is going to physically get him prepared to play through the season. But like when you had Joel Bitonio and you had Wyatt Teller, you don't want to run them into the ground. You want to get them ready enough. So if you have enough capable young players that you can plug in, you can sort of practice with a higher level of physicality because you have those guys that can step in. Like it's not just as simple as we saw at training camp. Myles Garrett shut down practice because he was so good against guys who just were not on the same level, not in the same league as him. Yeah. It made it impossible to practice. So they have to, at some point, have enough credible guys that they can at least do that. Or the other part of that is, going with the Myles Garrett thing, it can't be so lopsided that it's just like, in this case, the defense just murdering the offense to the point where they may get hurt as a result of that. They have to be able to, over the course of time and improve their roster enough that they have credibility on both sides of the ball, that if they go to younger players, they can do that and feel good about the work they're getting in, as opposed to just getting into a situation where it just becomes one side of the ball obliterating the other, and that being the risk.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. You're watching The React with Pete Smith. I'm Brad Ward. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. All right, let's get into our final couple of videos here. We're going to the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. We have, if Jameis was day one starter, where would this team be? Here we go.
Nuggets, who's not in the building, but he gifted me with this topic. So the Browns got 3 wins. Jameis Winston has been the starting quarterback for 2 of them. It seems like the team is gravitating towards Jameis. The question today is, if Jameis Winston was the day one starter for the Cleveland Browns, how do you think the season would have turned out?
I think they'd still be in the race.
I mean, I don't know. One or 2 more wins would have you in the race.
Which is why I say I think they'd still be in the race.
Obviously, he's played a lot better. He's played pretty good to very good in 3 of the 4 games that he's played. So, yeah, I mean, would they have another win or 2? Yeah, I think there's a reasonable chance. I mean, you never know for sure. But, But to be, there was never a consideration to play him. It wasn't like they were ever considering.
And we still have to remember that he was the starting quarterback for the 21-point loss to the Saints. Now, I don't know if we can put that on him. He threw for 395 yards.
Yeah, so who knows?
But it's still possible for them to, as a team, underperform, even though the quarterback play is better.
Right, because the defense has been inconsistent this year.
Yeah. Now, some of that, I think, is effort, and some of that goes to the fact that you feel like you have no chance when Deshaun Watson's in there.
I think you get about 2 more wins. I think you would have about 5 wins so far.
Well, at 5 and 6, you're in there.
You're in there.
You are in there.
Yeah, I think you.
I mean, the Broncos have played really well. They're 7-5, and they're the last seed. So I thought for a while, we thought for a while maybe the last seed would be 9 wins. I don't know now. You're probably going to need to win 10 games to get to the playoffs.
Most likely. We thought that
Which
was
the Browns
number at
can't
the beginning
do
of
at
the
this
year.
point. But
no,
had they
the
been
best they can do is get to 9
Had they been 5 and 6, that would have still been doable.
I was just trying to refresh my memory and go back and look, and they probably beat the Giants.
Yeah.
You could say they beat the Eagles. Raiders, Deshaun didn't play poorly against the Raiders.
Right, yeah.
So that wasn't a quarterback.
All right, so I pushed back on this Raiders thing, and because I think did you say that earlier too? Like it wasn't a quarterback.
John Watson's best game was against the Raiders, and if obviously the penalty was a huge factor, but he played well in that game.
What I would push back on in that game, because it was that game and the Giants game combined back to back where they had the ball and they just had to go score like 4 straight times in that game and couldn't get it done. So statistically, whatever else, they had to come up with one clutch drive to beat the Raiders. I mean, they scored 16 points, right? 20-16, I think it was. Yeah, 20-16. They had the ball 3-4 times at the end of that game where you just had to go score and win the game, and they couldn't do it. Same thing against the Giants. In consecutive weeks, I think they had 7 consecutive drives in the fourth quarter where you could have scored, taken the lead, and won the game, basically, yet they didn't do it. 0 for 7. So if he played good during the rest of the game, that's fine. The clutch factor was a 0.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. It's very hard for me to look at that game and go, that's the one. Now, it's possible that Jameis Winston is sort of the rising tide that lifts all boats and they play better. I think the Eagles is far more compelling because Watson was not good in that one. They struggled, and that was a game that was there for the taking. The defense did a really good job, until the Eagles are finally able to make a couple big plays in the passing game, but they shut down Saquon Barkley for the most part. The Giants game, certainly interesting. And then the other one that's interesting, obviously, that's the game that ended him, but the Bengals. They only lost by 7. And he didn't play, he was fine. Obviously, there are some people who are holding this torch going, this was the game he was going to turn it all around. I felt like when he was playing quote unquote well, his quote unquote well was average to above average. It wasn't like great quarterback stuff. And to be fair, like that's all that you needed in that exact moment. But I think, and some of that's due to the injury, but if Jameis plays that whole game, I feel better about their chances of winning that one. A game that was close. So I'm kind of inclined to go with the 1 or 2 more wins. I think the point is it highlights that the Browns had more issues than just quarterback. Certainly the quarterback is the biggest factor ultimately, but they were dragged down by some other factors in some of these other contests. But I don't think anybody said anything egregious. I think being in the hunt or whatever in the race would have been adequate for what they were doing. But the one that's, again, the Bengals game is interesting simply because the Browns would be in the race and the Bengals would be firmly out of it. Even though most people think the Bengals are treading water as it is. But still, so, they have even the Cowboys game. I mean, the Cowboys defense played really well in that game, but still, Deshaun was bad.
So bad.
So there's all these games, but in terms of 1-score games, the Browns have lost 1, 2, 3, 4 games lost by within one score.
And even the other one.
That's an area where they did better last year. So, and in some of those games, at least one of them was Dustin Hopkins just being unable to do anything. But yeah, I think about 2 more wins is about right. 5 and 6, certainly the season has a different complexion. Ultimately, I still think they're sort of in a bad situation because we came into the season going, they need to really take advantage of the early part of the schedule. And as we sit here today, it still looks like Browns desperately need to take advantage of that early part of the schedule. The Cowboys obviously fell apart for different reasons. Dak Prescott going down, even though they were sort of a very flawed team. The Jaguars stink. The Giants stink. The Raiders stink. Like, those are the 3 games you sit there and you got one of the 3 that just kill you overall. But if they pull out the Eagles game, that's a huge win because the Eagles are obviously a very good team right now. The Bengals games matters simply because it's the Bengals. So, like, that certainly would put a huge change in how we feel about the season. But ultimately, the issues are what they are. The offensive line needs significant work. The defense needs to be more consistent and just need to keep adding talent. But yeah, it's 5 and 6 is a different world. It's a completely different world from where 3 and 8 is.
Yeah, I agree, and I think even for the games that, like, I guess I can't think of one, like the Cowboys game, for example. Like, I think if you're starting the game with, into World's Fastest Point in the chat where he says, Pete, you've used the phrase energy vampire to describe the effect of Watson on the team. Is it not reasonable to think that side effects of that have had an impact on all aspects of play? And I think he has a point to that when we talk about the galvanizing of this team around Winston, right? You look at that versus Watson, and then you look at, just the way a game script changes in the first quarter. If you can put points on the board, it's a different game and it plays out differently, completely differently if you have, adequate quarterback play.
It would have changed how the Browns approached 4th downs in a number of games because there were games that in past years, and now with Jameis Winston, that they would go for that they did not with Deshaun Watson because they had no faith in what was happening offensively, undoubtedly. And yes, sucks the life out of everything around him. Certainly would have an impact on the team in some of those games. And to Jay's point about saying, guys don't believe they can win. Yeah. And that's why I have dismissed a lot of this whole thing of like the culture was somehow failing or that we need to, get up in arms about body language and stuff, because like your body language as a fan sucks around when Deshaun Watson's on the field because you hate it. That there may have been some of that going on, like, and you see a different world and you see the effort and the fight and all the stuff we loved about this team last year against the Steelers and some of these other games. So yeah, that's why it's really difficult to project why I think 2 is about right. It's really hard for me to believe they would be over 500. Just the amount of, whether it's been defensive failures or the offensive line just being a mess from week to week. And some of these things, certainly not Deshaun Watson's fault. That like at one point Joe Bitonio was left tackle, like, and that Joe Bitonio could do it, but like that is a sign of the state of things that they got into that situation that I have lost. I'm not going to put in the effort to count the number of combinations of linemen they've had to play this year. It's ridiculous. So those things would have come to a head at some point. So that's why 2 games I think is about right. But either way, the bottom line is still in it versus not. And maybe they have a little bit more momentum. Maybe they are playing a little bit better football, but they are where they are. They're coming off a win. They've got, the mini bye and a huge opportunity to take on teams that have winning records. I mean, the Browns don't play, the rest of their schedule. They have the only losing teams on it right now are the Bengals and then the Dolphins. And the Dolphins right now have sort of gotten a late surge because they've gotten, some guys healthy. But everybody else is a winning team. And, including the Steelers on the road, the Broncos this week on the road, the Chiefs at home, and then finishing up with the Ravens. Like, we always knew that this was going to be a big slog for them. And we were hoping, and the whole point of the, going into the season was Deshaun Watson could sort of figure it out as he went along and start reaching the crescendo at this point of the season and start playing really good football. Well, you never played a good football outside of the Raiders game. So that immediately set you back in some way and sort of, dictated where the season was ultimately going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sorry, this video, I'm going to a different one, but just the tone of the season and in general, you feel like would be different. Had games been closer earlier, or you felt like your quarterback was giving you a chance. As you said, it just sucked. It does. It sucks the life out of so much of what you're trying to accomplish.
People get so mad at like Elijah Moore and Jerry Jeudy, and they're not wrong in that they sort of acted unprofessionally at points, and Elijah Moore got himself sort of sat down for a quarter or whatever it was over that. But you can also sort of understand what it had to be like to play in a situation. And I've said this, like, it felt like the Browns had 8 guys on offense when Deshaun Watson was in quarterback. Like, they had one receiver, 5 linemen, and maybe a tight end and a running back, but like that was it. I
mean, it was all time bad, right? I mean, he couldn't get off his first read. He was dropping. I mean, we don't need to relive it all. It was just all time bad. So
all week again, leading up to the game against the Broncos, and then on December 3rd, the series officially begins. They're featuring the entire AFC North. The Browns, obviously, part of that. Are you excited for this, or considering the season the Browns have had, are you not excited to see whatever the HBO cameras can unveil from behind the scenes in Berea?
Unveil? Did you just? I thought he said unveil.
Unveil. Sorry, unveil. I'm rusty. I had 2 days off.
Rough crowd here, man. Rough crowd. Listen, Bull's always on it. And then I look at him and we're done. They could unveil some things, yeah.
Can they unveil some things?
They could definitely unveil.
They might unveil some veal parmesan.
Have you ever had the veal parmesan? I like the way Mike. I like the way you wrote that question, because, like, when I read it, I'm like, no, I'm not excited. I'm not. That's the level of apathy I've hit.
Excited, no. Interested, yes.
Interested is the word. Yeah. I am very interested, but excited.
Not excited, but he's interested, Pete. Just in case you're on the semantics meter there.
To be clear, they could be 11-0. I'm not excited for this.
Sure.
I hate this crap in the sense that I want just me to be able to see it and no one else.
Wait, what? Explain that again. You just
I want the HBO cameras to just feed it directly into my house and no one else gets to watch it. That's the dream. That was my whole thing with watching the Hugh Jackson one, was just, please God, stop showing this to anyone but me. I want to see what's going on. I know what it is. I know how bad it is. I don't want anyone else to see this. Destroy the footage. Never show it in public. Just let me see it. So, and I say that is, I don't think it will be bad for the Browns. I think they will be fine in terms of like how the organization looks and all these other things. Obviously, I don't expect Kevin Stefanski to talk about driving the bus or any other nonsense that I heard you talking about. But no, I'm not excited about it because, like, one, you don't know what you're going to get, and then two, like, what are we going to? There's nothing but all the things that can come out of it. Virtually none of it is positive.
I don't know.
Almost always a trap.
Shit's contagious, Pete.
Yeah, like, it is a trap for nonsense. And again, the further Hard Knocks is gone, the less teams are willing to give up, which makes you wonder how much of this is just going to be literally footage from games and stuff, which, basically NFL films, which would be great. And to be clear, like, I've said this in terms of Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry. I've said this the last couple of years. I've always felt they are their own best advocates, and they are always better when they're out there speaking for themselves as opposed to leaving air for other people to fill in
100%.
everything else. When they go out and talk or radio interviews, TV, whatever, they're more than welcome to come on here. I think they're really good at speaking for themselves and communicating what the team is trying to do, why they do things the way they do. Even if I've heard Kevin Stefanski explain his stoicism on 92.3 only to get ripped on 92.3 or 850 for doing the thing, he's telling you why he's doing it. I think they're really good at selling a vision and getting you to understand why they do the things the way they do and why you can believe in the things they do. So from that standpoint, it would not shock me if Hard Knocks gives me more of that. But it only takes one stupid clip. It only takes one thing to make it look negative or whatever, where somebody's going to find a way to make it into a huge deal that then gets to become their undoing or just becomes another distraction that is ultimately meaningless.
Yep.
I was excited when they came here before the season a number of years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Hugh Jackson
my
looks
excitement about this season is gone. The only drama for me is what will Jameis look like the rest of the way.
Only reason I'm here is for 400 yards.
Right.
I'm trying to see 400 yards in young guys. Kadarius Toney, are you somebody? What are we going to get from Cedric Tillman? Can I see a Zach
I don't know
Zenner?
Cedric Tillman's going to play this week.
Jerry Jeudy, can he get 1,000
Still
yards?
in protocol, right?
Tillman is still in protocol.
So yeah, I'm all for the stats at this point.
Might we see if Tillman doesn't play this week? Might we finally see? I forgot
Jamar
his name. He
Thrash.
hasn't played.
Yeah, Thrash.
He does have one catch. He got a catch 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's true.
And they did one reverse to Kadarius
Go
Toney. They got
back and
blew up.
listen to Andrew Berry's.
All right, before he goes in on this stupid rant right here, Thrash has actually played a lot despite not getting the ball. After Tillman went out,
Excellent reception for about 10
one
yards.
reception. But he has.
They say all this. They say all this. I imagine they were pretty pumped about beating the Steelers. And I'm betting they were all in on that Thursday night game.
Yes. Yeah.
So I understand the overall point. I can sympathize a little bit that, I want to see all the things they're talking about in terms of young players and development, except I know who the players are. Might be a difference between us, but but don't get me wrong. I'm going to be thrilled for this team when they win. I want them to win. I want them to go out and beat Steelers again. If they can, I would love to see them beat the Bengals, beat the Ravens. I would be thrilled if this team went 9-8. Don't tell me that would not be exciting or interesting. Now, I don't think it's going to happen, but I want this team to fight the rest of the way. I want this team to show you who I want them to show all of us why they are going to be better next year, because I firmly believe they have that in them with all these players who are playing, hopefully staying healthy. That's my other big thing. Please stay healthy. The Isaiah McGuires, the Mahmoud Diabates, the Cedric Tillmans, the Elijah Moore, figuring out what he's going to be. Jerry Jeudy, certainly. He's on a tear. I'd love to see him continue that. But I'm not sitting here going, man, I really want to see Zach Zinter. I want to see the Browns play their best guys. I want to see those guys play well and develop. And that's great. And I want to see that through the lens of hopefully winning more than they're losing. And if they can go out this next stretch and end up over 500 relative to their bye week, I would be absolutely thrilled with that. It doesn't erase the disappointment of the season, but again,
it matters.
It matters, but also it'd be against a much better schedule than the one they completely shit the bed on. So that would matter to me. And at that point, it's not Eric Mangini going 4-0 against that weird year where Josh Cribbs is suddenly a quarterback and they're just pulling things out of. They have to stand up to pull the things they're doing out of the offense. But I want to see things that they can replicate and that you can believe in next year that are going to put them in positions to succeed better. Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, those guys all playing well are things that I can believe in next year because most of those guys are going to be here next year.
Comments about Thrash when we drafted him.
What did he say? I don't remember. Loved him.
Glowing.
Yeah.
And then you're like, did he forget how to play football? We haven't developed him.
No.
He already was at a very, very high level. And
wait, what?
I just.
Did you say Jamari Thrash was already at a high level?
Yeah, he's talking about Thrash and Barry's comment. He's trying to go in on Barry for the way he talked about him.
Which is really interesting. I don't know that Andrew Barry said that. The person I've heard say that is Cam Justice. With talking to Quincy Carey, that how much they like Jamari Thrash. Like, if Jamari Thrash is good enough to be one of their top wideouts right now, great. But I'm really happy with Cedric Tillman, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore being your guys, and like getting David Njoku in there and Jordan Akins, who I'm increasingly wanting back for another year. Like, don't get me wrong, I would love to see Jamari Thrash get opportunities if they're there, and he's been active, but like not at the expense of dudes. You know, Cedric Tillman for his part would start next if the Browns are going into next season, unless a draft scenario happens, which I would really enjoy. He's going to be starting there next year outside. Like, that is already a dub. I want them to continue on the dubs. Now, having said that, like Jamari Thrash, why would we be disappointed in a fifth round pick not cracking the lineup at this point? This is like how it's supposed to go.
That's where my question came in. And how do you know that he hasn't developed? Like, what kind? I mean, that's just a. I don't.
Well, this is the thing. We did this
Andrew
with
Barry's
Tillman.
comments about Thrash when we drafted him.
What did he say? I don't remember. Loved him.
Glowing.
Yeah.
And then you're like, did he forget how to play football? We haven't developed him.
No.
He already was at a very, very high level. And I just keep hearing those comments back in my head. Like, who was he talking about?
In fairness to Thrash, he's a late round pick. You know, late round picks don't often make an impact in their rookie year at wide receiver.
Let me ask you this question, Dustin.
Yeah.
Because me as a person looking outside, looking in, get frustrated. Have you ever had a teammate who, like, he was either a young guy or just an undrafted guy that was like everybody knew was good? You're like, this kid is why is he not playing? Like, does that trickle down to your level where you're like, why don't coach ever put him in the game? This guy's dynamite. Or is it something that they're doing that is prohibiting them from getting on the field, or just sometimes it's a numbers game?
It's a great question. The answer to that is yes, 100%. You see guys all the time. In the 5 years I spent in the NFL on rosters, there were undrafted players, late round picks on every team that the veterans, young guy, didn't matter. Everyone on the team knew, like, that guy's a beast. Like, that guy should be playing, but he's undrafted. There were guys, and I've told Adam this because Adam and I have been together for a long time and spent a lot of time together talking about certain things. There were players that, like, literally probably should have started for our team, like a receiver, and I knew because I played corner. And so I'm going up against the starters. I'm going up against the undrafted free agents. And a lot of those guys, the opportunity just never presented itself because you had a receiver who's making, $12 million.
That's crazy.
It is
You'd
crazy.
think a coach
would always play the best guys.
Play the best guys.
Always.
Not always the coach's decision.
But it's the general manager that has skin in the game. The GMs, you know it, in baseball, they hold on to these guys longer than they should. Same with football. For a long time, Andrew Barry, I think 3 years before he cut any of his draft picks. Like, some of those sucked. And we knew they sucked from day one. But you hold on to them.
So my buddy, Ryan Hogue, we had him on the show one time.
Yeah.
Receiver, and he was Mr. Irrelevant with the Vikings.
Oh, wow.
And he played at, Augustine College or Augustine
Division III school.
Up in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And he was the fastest receiver I've ever guarded. Like, he was excellent in practice all the time and never made a roster. Oh, actually did. He got on 2 games, but that was it. Never played. And it's one example, but there are a lot of those. I have like 3-4 guys on every team.
What's the quarterback with the Bills again? I keep forgetting.
Jabron Hamden.
Jabron Hamden, right.
Who played at Indiana, ironically, and was an okay college quarterback, but he was way better than everyone we had in Buffalo. I'm not saying he would have been like a legit starter across the league, but like for what we had in Buffalo, like he was better than Trent Edwards.
Did you ever play on a team where the coaching staff, because I wouldn't expect the general manager would do this, but where the coaching staff would call in the defensive backs and ask for advice on roster decisions on the wide receivers. Because that's the position that I think. I love when wide receivers talk about DBs they've gone against and the other way around. Because that is mano a mano, and oftentimes you don't have help and you're on an island. And I always thought that you
It's a great question, Jay. Amazing.
guys know better than.
There's a lot of stuff that's just wild on this. So
Yeah.
One, his character assassination of Andrew Berry for loving his draft picks or whatever, which is
never stops.
Which is fine until you remember that how many undrafted free agents seem to play for this team and contribute.
Yes.
Like right now, Mamu Diabate is a starting linebacker, and I think will be a starting linebacker next year, undrafted rookie. Ronnie Hickman has played a whole lot of football. These guys are both at his second year as undrafted free agents. The Browns, D'Anthony Bell played a ton. His first year as an undrafted rookie. The Browns have done this over and over and over again. It is a huge part of this. So that's one part. Now, the part he's talking about, it happens in terms of if you're saying, DBs are clamoring for, are saying all these things about a receiver or whatever. The DB's coach isn't an idiot. He's going to go to a coaching meeting at some point and talk to the receivers coach and be like, man, these guys are all enamored with this guy, and they're going to factor that in. They're not going to make roster decisions. Now, what I find really interesting about this whole line of thought is Jay's favorite GM did all the things he hates. Tried to dictate to Freddie Kitchens who should be playing, who should be on the field, made dumb decisions in terms of wanting to favor his guys over guys who are clearly better than him. Chad Thomas had the Browns traded Emmanuel Ogbah and cut Carl Nassib because they wanted Chad Thomas on the field
to play.
Both those guys are real football players, even though Carl Nassib's out of the league now. And Chad Thomas is a thriving music career and was never worth a damn on the football field. Like literally all the things Jay hates, that is his boy John Dorsey as a GM. Like the Browns, fortunately, and this is part of the reason that it's really valuable that Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry have such a productive relationship, is they don't deal with this crap. Yeah, on some level, is there financial considerations? Sure. But if you're going to talk about Deshaun Watson as a glaring example, but they were both of them turned their keys on that one to fire that particular missile. But like in general, if you're asking, have undrafted free agents or rookies played over, or whatever played over draft picks? The answer is yes. And the same token, the Browns traded DPJ, a move that people hated, and were mad that the Browns didn't get more for DPJ to get Cedric Tillman on the field because he was what they felt was a better player based on the practice field. DPJ, I was sad to see him leave. I wish him nothing but success, but he's done nothing literally since the Browns traded him to Detroit, and Cedric Tillman now looks like a dude. So all these things Dustin's talking about, I don't doubt that they happen. And you will hear players talk about stories about guys they thought they were going to be good, whether they would have been or not. And to his point, he mentioned the one dude and then immediately qualified by saying better than what we had, but that doesn't mean necessarily good relative to the rest of the league. There's no doubt that some of these power dynamics go on, which is why you want to be in a situation the Browns are where they don't have this crap, because the Browns have already been down this road. It was really, really unproductive and ultimately led to a lot of hurt feelings and players who wanted to leave. And for example, let's go back to John Dorsey. John Dorsey made no secret of the fact he wanted to trade David Njoku and then trade Hollywood Higgins. And had he kept that job, they were both gone at that time. So he would have traded him for God only knows. They were productive with Kevin Stefanski. Obviously, Hollywood Higgins, the 1 year, was their second leading receiver and arguably better than Jarvis Landry was that year. And David Njoku has obviously been a player that was worth keeping. But that was how John Dorsey operated. He quit on guys super quick and wanted to get rid of them and replace them with his guys. He was a his guy type GM, whereas the Browns are far less concerned about getting their guys and they are more worried about getting the right guy. No, yeah, Carlos Hyde. Oh, baby. Yeah, good example. Carlos Hyde over Nick Chubb, one of the all-time bad decisions. And credit to John Dorsey on that one. He just traded Carlos Hyde and made it so there was no other choice. But yeah, I mean, this is the problem is you listen to commentators talk about all these things they don't like, and then we'll talk up guys who did the exact things they're talking about. And I exclude Dustin from that because I don't know that he has a strong opinion one way or the other. But anyone who's in this chat has heard Jay go on a diatribe about how great John Dorsey was, and had no people who think John Dorsey was an idiot, and still listen to people still talk him up as some great general manager because he lucked out on Nick Chubb. Great. He really did not want to take him. He wanted to take Rashad Penny and was ultimately beaten out by the Seattle Seahawks on that decision. And if you go to Denzel Ward, great pick. He could not have missed if he tried. You can go look. He would not have missed. He would have taken to about pick 20 before he found a bad player. And I would still argue, I love Denzel Ward and I'm very happy to have him, but like based on their initial ability in the league, like Jairi Alexander was the superior corner. But whatever. We give John Dorsey a world of credit for being incapable of missing on some of these picks, and then setting the rest of them on fire and completely forgetting they happened. The amount of awful picks that they were made in 2021, and some of the other decisions he made, Odell Beckham Jr., horrendous trade, so on and so forth. But just a disastrous GM. And I think he's great in the role he has for the Detroit Lions, which is, separated from making any meaningful decisions.
Now, Andrew Berry does have he is known. He very often goes back to his same guys. Like he'll bring the same guy back to the roster over and over again. Yeah,
but I suspect a lot of that's coaching.
Yes.
Coaches who get guys that know the system, coaches that I know what he can do. It's predictable and all this other stuff. And then obviously, since the Browns roster has gotten better, they've been able to cut bait pretty quick.
It's been less. It's been less lately.
Almost couldn't have been cut faster. So you sort of get the other side of it, where the Browns have gotten good enough of their roster where they have to make tougher decisions and not sort of sit and wait for guys to sort of figure it out. But the Anthony Schwartz thing obviously didn't work. But it's not like they were playing Anthony Schwartz over better players much of that time. Exactly. It just unfortunately didn't work.
Just in a preseason game where they tried to give him the ball 100 times, but he refused to catch it.
Yes. Well, that was I felt bad for him on that one. But yeah, and that's fine. You can do that in a preseason game. Don't do that in the regular season. And unfortunately, they didn't. And Anthony Schwartz will always have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game. Overtime victory. Anthony Schwartz was a massive contributor to that game. That is his game.
What?
Not worth the third-round pick.
No, not at all. Let me ask you this final question of the night. It's a brain scrambler. No, I'm just kidding. It's not. Donovan Peoples-Jones. Would you bring him back?
No, I like the player. I like the kid. He's very easy to root for. But where am I going to put him? The Browns have
depth.
Yeah, they're good. Like I said, if we can't get Jamari Thrash on the field, there's somebody still holding a torch for Michael Woods II out there, hoping he's going to get on the field. There's always going to be somebody else I'm more interested in at this point.
Sure.
Donovan Peoples-Jones was a overwhelmingly successful selection for a 6th-round pick, and ultimately they got the pick back in the trade. So good operation in terms of how they handled DPJ. I wish him nothing but the best, but it's over.
He went 300, 600, 900.
Can't crack the lineup in Detroit.
It's crazy to me. He seemed, with his athleticism and his height.
And punt return. Like you would think if they were going to do it, he could have done that. But then
his ability to track the ball on the sideline. Like he always had a knack along the boundary for contorting his body and playing the ball better than in corners in a lot of situations. And he couldn't separate all that well, but he was terrific at the catch point. And contested catches. So I don't know.
Well, like if you want to get nuts, like the dream right this second, assuming his draft process goes exactly how his last 2 seasons have gone at Arizona, I would be more than happy to welcome Tet McMillan to the Browns and let James just chuck it all over the park for about 5,000 yards and potentially 50 interceptions. I don't know, but he's a freak show, and having that with Judy and Tillman and all these other guys would be a lot of fun. Now, there are a whole lot of really fun. Trust me, I will have a whole lot more unpopular draft takes that have nothing to do with using a first-round pick on the offensive line or quarterback throughout this draft season, but that is certainly one of them. And just based on what I think is going to be there's no such thing as a bad wide receiver class. I cannot say that enough. But in terms of like that guy where you look at and go, he's a number one receiver, I can plug him in right now, and I think I know exactly what he's going to be. Tet McMillan to me is that guy, and I can't verify his character or any of the other things. We'll see how he tests and all that stuff, but he is a 6'5" freak show that has dominated. He has dominated now 2 different conferences. His production is out of this world. He's far outproducing Travis Hunter, and has a skill set that I think really fits well with what the Browns already have.
I lied. That wasn't my last question. This is my last question. Do you think that Hunter will end up playing corner or wide receiver in the NFL?
That's a really interesting question. So, like, if I just watch him, I would say he should be a corner that occasionally plays wide receiver. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, I like his physicality. He is a willing tackler. And it is far easier to play full-time corner and occasional wide receiver.
Yeah.
Playing occasional corner is a miserable idea.
It's weird,
Any position that asks you to play backwards you need all of the attention there. Now, if I look at his like data profile in terms of production and stuff like that, wide receiver, because even though the fact is that Travis Hunter will hit somebody and put people on the ground, he doesn't in terms of like his overall tackle production. And people will poo-poo that and go, well, that's not really that important. It is. In fact, and people will then point to and go, well, Deion Sanders didn't put anybody on the ground. He actually did in college. He had a lot of tackles, and that stuff does matter, in terms of projecting them forward. Now, Travis Hunter might be so athletic in athletic testing and all that stuff that it doesn't matter. But if I'm like sitting there trying to project what's the best way to use him as a multiple way player, it's corner, occasional receiver, and then probably every return aspect of the game. More punt than kickoff the way it's being done. But I would not want to make him a full-time receiver, occasional corner. I think that is a bad way to do it. He's super gifted, obviously, but I think that's a really difficult thing to sort of practice. Corner, as we're seeing with Martin Emerson or Sauce Gardner or even Patrick Surtain. So, like, Martin Emerson is having a nightmare season in many ways, as is Sauce Gardner. That is how volatile, that is how year to year that position is. It's a lot like relief pitching in some ways. Patrick Surtain, miserable year last year by his standards, arguably the best corner in football this year. Like, it is so difficult. And that is from guys who are doing this all the time. So to then try to ask somebody to do it part-time, I think that's a recipe for disaster. Or at the very least, you are saying you can only do one thing. You are basically saying, whether it's some deep zone guy, like playing him at safety at that point. And you're just like, you're the center fielder. Go nuts. Or you're just saying you are playing man and anything else. I'm going to put you on this guy on this particular play, and this is all you're ever going to do. I think you lose a lot of nuance with that. So ultimately, I think his best path forward, based on his production, and I'm counting this over 2 years, full-time receiver, which would be no corner and return stuff. But if you're an NFL team and you're trying to get all the value out of Travis Hunter, corner, occasional wide receiver, returner.
Yeah. It's really, Chris saying Hunter will be a bust. I don't think he'll be a bust. I think he would be good either way you put him, but you have to manage him properly. So like you said, I agree. I think if you make him a full-time wide receiver, I think he'll be damn good. And if you make him a corner, I think he'll be excellent as well. But that does allow you to use him in some capacity on the offensive side. But you can't do it the other way around. You're right.
It's infinitely easier to walk over and play wide receiver.
Yes.
Because you're not you're not being asked to play backwards. You are forwards, yeah, cuts and those things, but his athleticism can take over at that point in certain aspects, and you can just plug him in a very limited sort of effort to get him the ball and do things. Whereas corner is just such a, and it's not to say receiver isn't a difficult discipline, that, it's a craft and everything else. But I think if he proves to be athletic, as I believe he is based on having watched him, he's gifted enough where he can still find success occasionally, not unlike the way Deion Sanders did in his day, occasionally being a wide receiver. But corner is just such a rigorous discipline and just such a difficult position to play that I think that's a disaster if you are saying, he can occasionally practice a corner.
Yeah. It'd be very difficult. Yeah, but it's just a guy you want to get the ball in his hands, because he can make things happen occasionally.
Yeah, I mean, he's electric. It's undeniable his ability to get open, the way he attacks the ball. I think the only complaint you have with him, and it's not like he's small, it's just he's not big. He's like listed 6'1" and like 185, which is fine. He can be very successful, and and he does have the length, more of the prototypical length to be a corner in that scenario. And there are any number of receivers. I don't think Justin Jefferson is all that different in terms of size and all these other things, but like it sits there and you go, well, that's not really special in the way that these other things are special. Now you put them on tape, you're like, wow.
Yeah. Good point. Thank you guys so much for watching the React tonight on the OBR streaming network. You guys have been fantastic. I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the football, enjoy the food, enjoy the company. We are grateful that you guys are, awesome enough to just hang out with us for 2 hours every Wednesday night, and we appreciate that greatly. Tell a friend, hit like and subscribe on your way out, but most importantly, have a fantastic Thanksgiving. Any parting words, Pete?
No, I mean, I hope everybody has a fun, safe holiday and all that good stuff, and gets plenty of football, and hopefully everybody's sobered up from the overwhelmingly exciting Zips victory over Toledo. It's just great when an academic powerhouse can finally get that recognition on the playing field against a blue blood like Toledo. It's a great win for a program that desperately needs it. 4 wins. That's a huge season for Akron.
Chris, I'll be back on Friday night with things I think I know. I don't know who will be with me yet, but I'll be here. So we won't leave you long, just tomorrow. So thank you all for tuning in. And if you haven't yet, hit like on your way out. For everybody over at the OBR, have a very, very fantastic day tomorrow, and be safe. From Pete Smith, my name is Brad Ward. This has been another edition of The React. We are out.